The day my mother-in-law handed me a 7-page party planning document and said, "You have the most free time out of everyone," I almost laughed. Almost. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 3 floors above her dining room table, my laptop was open to an email from a Fortune 500 client offering me a brand design contract worth more than my husband made in 2 years. But I didn't say a word. I just took the document, nodded, and started making a grocery list. My name is Nora. I'm 32 years old and I'm a freelance graphic designer. I've been doing this for 6 years. I have a home studio, a client roster that spans 4 time zones, and a portfolio that got featured in a design publication last spring. None of that matters to my in-laws. To them, I'm the woman who sits at home in pajamas clicking a mouse while their son goes to a real office and does real work. My husband Daniel is a project manager at a construction firm. His family has always been proud of that. His father spent 30 years as a civil engineer. His mother ran the PTA and volunteered at their church every Sunday. His older sister Renee is a loan officer at a regional bank. When Daniel brought me home for the first time, I remember his mother Patricia asking what I did. I told her I was a freelance designer. She said, "Oh, how fun, like a hobby." That was 5 years ago. She has never once updated that opinion. When Daniel and I got married, I tried. I brought wine to dinners. I asked questions about Patricia's garden. I learned how to make her pot roast recipe from scratch because Daniel mentioned once that it was his favorite. I showed up. Every holiday, every birthday, every casual Sunday lunch. I showed up and I smiled and I helped clear the table and I never once brought up my work, unless someone asked, because I had learned very quickly that no one was going to ask. Renee was the one the family talked about at dinner. Renee got promoted. Renee closed a big account. Renee bought a new car. I sat across the table and ate my pot roast and told myself it didn't matter, because at the end of the night, Daniel and I would go home. And he would tell me he was proud of me. And that was enough. Except it started not being enough somewhere around year 3. It started small. Patricia would ask Daniel questions about our finances directly, as if I weren't sitting right there. Is Nora still doing her little design thing? Is that bringing in enough? She never asked me. She asked him. Like I was a dependent. Like my answer wouldn't be reliable. Then there were the comments at family dinners. Nothing outright cruel. Just small. "Nora, you're so lucky you can set your own schedule. Must be nice not to have a boss." Renee had to cancel a vacation because of a work deadline. You probably don't have to worry about things like that, right? I did have deadlines. I had deadlines that made me skip lunch 3 days in a row. I had a client in London who called at 6 in the morning because of the time difference. I had contracts with revision clauses and delivery penalties and intellectual property agreements. But I had learned by then that explaining any of this only made me sound defensive. So I smiled and said, "Yeah, it's flexible," and moved on. Daniel tried. I want to say that clearly because it matters. He wasn't oblivious. He talked to his mother more than once. She would agree with him in the moment, and then forget the conversation ever happened by the following Sunday. His father was easier. Thomas was a quiet man who mostly stayed out of family dynamics and watched football. But Patricia had a way of steering things. And what Patricia decided about a person tended to stick. What she had decided about me was that I was a nice enough girl who wasn't quite serious. The party was for their 32nd wedding anniversary. Patricia announced it in February, which gave everyone 4 months to prepare. I remember thinking that was a long runway for a dinner party. Then I saw the guest list. 60 people. Seated dinner. 3 courses. At their home in Meadowbrook. Renee was put in charge of coordination, which as far as I could tell meant she would send 1 group text per month and show up the day of in a blazer. Daniel's younger brother, Kevin, was assigned to handle drinks and music. His girlfriend, Simone, was responsible for flowers. Patricia would manage the decor. And me? I was assigned catering, all of it. For 60 people? "You work from home," Patricia said when she walked me through the plan. "So you'll have the flexibility to prep everything. We were going to hire a caterer, but honestly, Nora, your cooking has gotten so good, and it would be so much more personal this way. She patted my hand. Family is always better than strangers, don't you think? I looked at the menu she had already planned. Shrimp cocktail for 60, Caesar salad, braised short ribs, roasted vegetables, dinner rolls, a 3-layer anniversary cake from scratch. Patricia, I said, and I want to be clear that I did say this, I did try, this is a lot for one person. Even professional caterers bring a team for an event this size. She waved her hand. You'll have the whole week to prep, and we'll all be here the day of to help. Who specifically will be helping me? Well, everyone will pitch in. That was not an answer. I knew it wasn't an answer. But Daniel was watching me with a look I recognized, hopeful, a little nervous, and I didn't want to make things hard for him. So I said I would think about it and let her know. That night, I told Daniel I was uncomfortable. He said he understood. He said he would talk to her. He did talk to her. He did talk to her. He did talk to her. She called me the next day and said she had heard I had some concerns, and that she wanted me to know how much it would mean to the whole family if I did this. She said it in the warmest voice she had. She said, the whole family, 3 times. I said yes. I know how that sounds. I know what the right answer was. But I said yes and I started planning. For 3 weeks, I built a prep timeline alongside my actual client deadlines. I was in the middle of a rebrand project for a mid-sized tech company and a packaging refresh for an organic food brand. I was working 45 hours a week on client work and spending evenings building spreadsheets for a party that wasn't mine. Daniel offered to help. He came into the kitchen some nights and chopped vegetables and asked me what else I needed. He was trying. I kept telling myself that. 2 weeks before the party, I got an email. I almost missed it because I was in the middle of exporting files for a client presentation. The sender was Ren Creative Group, a brand consulting firm based in Chicago that I had pitched to 8 months earlier and mostly forgotten about. The subject line was, Partnership Proposal. Next steps. I read it 3 times. They wanted to move forward. Full brand identity system for their parent company's new consumer division. 12-week engagement. The number at the bottom of the email was $180,000. I sat in my office chair for a long time after reading that email. Long enough that Daniel knocked on the door to ask if I wanted dinner. In a minute, I said. My voice came out very calm. I don't know how. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I needed to review the contract. I needed to get on a call with their lead. I needed to think. And honestly, I think some part of me needed to hold it privately for a little while, just for me, before it became a thing that other people had opinions about. The party was on a Saturday in June. I arrived at Patricia and Thomas's house on Friday afternoon, with my car packed with enough food to feed a small neighborhood. I had prepped for 5 days. Short ribs braised and ready to reheat. Shrimp cleaned and chilled. Cake layers baked and waiting to be assembled. I had planned every dish down to the minute. Patricia greeted me at the door and said, "Oh, wonderful, you're here. Thomas just needs help moving some tables before you set up." So I moved tables. And then I unloaded my car, by myself, because Renee hadn't arrived yet and Kevin was on his way, and Daniel was stuck in traffic on the bridge. By 7 that evening, I had set up the kitchen, organized the prep schedule for the next morning, and assembled the first 2 layers of the anniversary cake. Patricia came in once to check on things. She looked around, said looks like you have it all under control, and went back to arranging centerpieces in the dining room. I did not have it all under control. I had it technically managed. Those are different things. Daniel arrived at 8. He helped me with the cake for an hour, and then fell asleep on the couch because he had been up since 5 for a site walkthrough. I didn't wake him. He looked peaceful and I didn't want to be someone who couldn't let their husband rest. The day of the party, I was in the kitchen by 7 in the morning. By 10, I had the short ribs in the oven for their final braise, and the shrimp arranged on platters in the refrigerator, Renee arrived at 10:30 in a white linen dress and immediately began telling me what the table setup should look like. I listened. I nodded. I kept stirring. "The salad dressing," she said, peering into the bowl. "Did you use anchovy paste? Mom doesn't like too much anchovy." "It's a Caesar dressing," I said. "The recipe Patricia gave me." "Right, but she's been doing a modified version lately. You should check with her." I checked with Patricia. Patricia said the dressing was fine. Renee decided it wasn't fine and added something from the spice cabinet while my back was turned. I found out when I tasted it 20 minutes later. I remade the dressing. Guests started arriving at 2. By that point, I had been on my feet for 7 hours. I want to describe what the kitchen looked like at 2:15, because I think it matters. Every surface had something on it. The timing chart I had printed and taped to the cabinet was already 3 deviations behind because the oven had run hot and the rolls needed more time, and someone had moved my thermometer. The sink was full of prep dishes that no one had washed. I was running the first course, managing the oven temperature, and trying to locate the serving tongs that Renee had moved to a drawer I didn't know existed. Thomas walked in at one point and said, "Something smells incredible." "Thank you," I said. He stood there for a moment, and I genuinely thought, he was going to offer to help. He said, "Patricia's going to need another bottle of the Prosecco from the garage." Then he left. I got the Prosecco. At 3 o'clock, Renee came into the kitchen to tell me that several guests had dietary restrictions that she was only now mentioning. 2 were vegetarian, 1 was avoiding shellfish. I had made shrimp cocktail for 60. I did not cry. I want to be very clear that I did not cry in Patricia's kitchen. I rearranged the platters, set aside a vegetarian portion of the short rib sauce over roasted vegetables, and kept moving. At 3:45, I heard Patricia outside the kitchen door talking to someone. Her voice carried. "Nora does this kind of thing. She has so much time, she doesn't really work. It's sweet. She does little design projects, but honestly, this is where she shines. She's basically catered this whole thing. Isn't that something?" The person she was talking to laughed warmly and said something about how lovely that was. I stood at the stove and did not move for about 4 seconds. Then I turned the heat down on the vegetables and kept going. Daniel's uncle, a man named Ray who had driven up from Virginia, came into the kitchen around 4. He was the kind of man who didn't ask permission to help. He just picked up a dish towel and started drying the stack of prep bowls by the sink without a word. "You've been in here all day," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. Anyone else been back here?" "Daniel was here earlier." He nodded slowly. "The short ribs smell unbelievable." He kept drying dishes. "You do this for a living?" "No," I said. "I'm a graphic designer." He looked up. "Really? What kind of work?" I told him. "Brand identity, packaging, visual systems." He asked a few genuine questions. He didn't say, "Oh, how fun." He asked what software I used, whether I worked with agencies or direct clients, how I found the transition from employed to freelance. We talked for about 12 minutes while I finished plating the first course. It was the most normal conversation I had in that kitchen all day. When he left, he said, "My daughter does something similar. UX design, good work, solid career." He said it simply, like it was a fact, because it was. I thanked him and he went back to the party. At 5:30, Patricia came in. The party was in full swing. The dining room was loud and warm and I could hear laughter through the door. She looked at the platters waiting to go out and then looked at me. "Nora," she said, "the main course needs to go out by 6. Are we on track?" "Yes," I said. "Everything is ready." She hesitated. For a moment, I thought she was going to say something else. Then she said, "You've done a wonderful job with all of this." And it came out genuinely, not as a performance, and I think she meant it. I also think she had no idea how much it cost to be the person standing in this kitchen while her party happened in the other room. "Thank you," I said. She started to leave, then turned back. "Your phone has been going off, on the counter there." She pointed to where I had set my phone face down hours ago. I didn't look, just, you might want to check it. She left. I picked up the phone. 11 missed calls and 14 messages. 3 were from my contact at Ren Creative Group. 1 was from my attorney, whom I had asked to review the contract. The rest were from Daniel, who had apparently seen a notification on my shared calendar that he didn't understand and was trying to figure out what WCG final signature call meant. The most recent text from my contact at Ren said, "Nora, we need your signature today to lock the start date. Can we connect in the next 30 minutes? We want to move forward. This is a big one for us, and we want it to be you." I looked at the clock. 5:42. I looked at the 6 full platters of short ribs waiting to go out. I washed my hands. I dried them. I picked up my phone and walked to the back hallway, just past the kitchen where it was quiet. The call took 11 minutes. My contact walked me through 2 final contract points. My attorney had already cleared both of them. At 5:53, I opened the DocuSign link, reviewed the signature page, and signed. $180,000. 12 weeks. Starting July 1st. I stood in the hallway for a moment. Just a moment. Then I went back into the kitchen, picked up the first platter of short ribs, pushed open the kitchen door with my shoulder, and walked out into the party. Ray was the first one to see me come out. He was standing near the entrance to the dining room, and he immediately stepped forward and took the platter from me without being asked. "What else is there?" he said. "5 more. I'll get them." He went to the kitchen. He came back. He got all 5. The main course went out, and no one in the dining room noticed that the woman who had cooked it had just signed the largest contract of her career in the hallway 4 feet away. Dinner went well. The short ribs were good. I know they were good because I had tested that recipe 4 times. The cake came out cleanly, and Patricia made a sound when she saw it that sounded like genuine surprise. Thomas raised his glass and gave a toast about 32 years and choosing the right partner every day, and everyone at the table clinked their glasses, and it was a lovely moment. I was sitting at the far end of the table next to Daniel. He had squeezed my hand under the table every few minutes all evening. He didn't know yet either. I hadn't told him. I wanted to do it right. After dessert, when guests were moving around and the volume in the room had softened to that comfortable late-party murmur, Daniel's cousin asked the table what everyone did for work. It was casual conversation. He pointed to me. "Nora, you're a designer, right? What are you working on?" I felt Patricia look up from her end of the table. "Actually," I said, and I said it the way you say something when you've been waiting very patiently for the right moment, and the moment has finally arrived. "I just signed a new contract today. Brand identity project. 12 weeks. Daniel turned to look at me. "Today?" "About 45 minutes ago. From the hallway." A few people at the table asked polite questions. The cousin asked who the client was. I told them the parent company name. Ray, from across the table, looked up and nodded slowly. Thomas asked what the project scope was, and I explained it briefly, and he asked a follow-up question that told me he was actually listening. Patricia was quiet. I noticed, because Patricia was rarely quiet. After a moment she said, "How much is something like that?" I had not planned to say the number. I want to be honest about that. But I also think some part of me had been waiting 5 years to say it, and the right words simply arrived. $180,000, I said, for the 12-week engagement. The table was briefly genuinely quiet. Daniel's hand found mine under the table and held it very tightly. Renee said, "For design?" "For brand identity work, yes." Thomas said, "Well." He said it the way people say things when they are recalibrating. "Well, congratulations, Nora." "Thank you." Ray raised his glass in my direction. "To Nora." A few people raised their glasses. It wasn't a dramatic toast. It was a small, real moment, and I took it. Later, when most guests had gone and Daniel and I were washing dishes in the kitchen together, Ray had insisted on helping and was drying things without being asked. Same as before. Patricia came in. She stood near the doorway for a moment. Daniel looked at her and then looked at me, and quietly took the dish towel into the other room to give her space. I didn't know, she said. I know you didn't. I meant what I said earlier. About the food, you did a wonderful job today. It was a lot of work, I said. For one person. She was quiet for a moment. I know. I think I've taken for granted. She stopped. Tried again. I think I've had the wrong idea about what you do. And I'm sorry for that. She didn't say it perfectly. It wasn't a grand moment, but she said it, and she meant it, and I was 32 years old and standing in her kitchen at 10 o'clock at night, after the longest day I'd had in recent memory, and I wasn't going to refuse a real apology because it hadn't arrived in the right packaging. Thank you, I said. I appreciate that. She nodded. She picked up a clean dish from the rack and took it to the cabinet without being asked. We finished the kitchen in relative quiet, and it wasn't fixed. 5 years of being seen a certain way doesn't reverse itself in one evening. But something had shifted, and I felt it, and I think she did too. In the car on the way home, Daniel held my hand across the center console. He had been doing this our entire marriage, reaching over without looking, just to hold on. 180, he said, still a little disbelieving. In the hallway. I wasn't going to miss the signing window. He laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes out when something surprises you in the best direction. Nora. I know. You cooked dinner for 60 people and signed a $180,000 contract on the same afternoon. The dinner was the harder part, I said. And I meant it. And he laughed again, and I let myself feel the fullness of that moment. The signed contract. The quiet apology, the dish towel passed without ceremony, and Daniel's hand in mine on the drive home. 6 weeks later, I was 3 weeks into the Wren engagement and billing more hours than I ever had. My studio setup was the same. My schedule was still flexible. I still worked in what Patricia would probably call pajamas on some mornings, though they were actually studio pants, and the distinction mattered to me if not to anyone else. Patricia called one afternoon. She was planning a birthday lunch for Thomas and wanted to know if I'd be free. She said, "No cooking required, I'm calling the restaurant myself." It was a small thing, but small things are usually how large things begin. I said yes, I'd be there. And I meant it.